Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. First thing I gotta say is, wow, you guys really liked that last video, huh? Because it has finally done something that I thought was unthinkable for a while. It actually dethroned the paleoconservative video. For new people who don't understand the lore of the Pluribus Unum channel, I still do technically do them, but for a while I did really short videos where I would look over a political ideology, give a basic rundown of it, and then, just give a basic rundown of it for people who didn't know. And one of the videos, I usually did it so that, because I used to do videos weekly, and that was still unsustainable, but it was somewhat sustainable with that model. So what ended up happening was, in order to prepare myself for a better video that was going to be made the next week, I made a short little video about the paleoconservative ideology. And I guess paleoconservatism was just really popular at the time, because that video ended up becoming really popular really fast, to the point where it became my most popular video for a long period of time. And this recent Mexican video has finally dethroned the king. I will say that I do have some it's not necessarily that I don't necessarily hold that much nostalgia for that video, because it's a video about paleoconservatism, one of the ideologies that I'm the most diametrically opposed to. I don't really have a connection to paleoconservatism, but I did like the idea of just having this video that I didn't really put any effort in, that I just shout out, of this ideology that I had no real stake in. It was kind of funny to have that be the top channel video, but I do like the fact that a video that I guess better represents my channel is now the highly viewed one. So yeah, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, coming from the United Kingdom, big news: Julian Assange finally has the ability to appeal his extradition to the United States. Basically, for those who haven't been paying attention, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has been basically he's been in jail for after his high-profile leaks in 2010, he left his home nation and then went to Ecuador, the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and he basically stayed there for a long period of time until the socialist president at the time, Rafael Correa, actually was kicked, after he resigned. Well, he didn't resign, but after he left office, and then a new person was elected, Lenin Moreno. Lenin Moreno basically just said psych, and then let the UK government take him into custody. And many people have been trying to make sure that Julian Assange doesn't get extradited to the United States, because they're worried about the treatment that he would get in the prisons in the United States due to the high-profile stakes of the case. Despite the fact that the US government has been giving many assurances to Julian Assange, a lot of people have been very skeptical of that situation. If you thought the whole Epstein situation would be sussy, imagine what would happen with Assange. Assange is wow. I was gonna say he's a bigger deal than Epstein. I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but you can judge it for yourself, I guess. Is Epstein a bigger thing, or is Julian Assange? I'd argue Assange, probably because he ties into the military-industrial complex, but then you can also make the case about Epstein because of his connections with a lot of prominent politicians or whatever. But yeah, it's a big deal that he can finally not face extradition. Maybe, possibly. There isn't a date yet, but it will come. Speaking of coming in the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom has actually decided to do something very funny. After many long-standing rumors, it has finally happened. They have finally agreed to hold an election. If you don't know the rules about a parliamentary system, is basically you have elections on normally scheduled times, but you can call, the prime minister technically has the the ability to call elections whenever he wants, as long as the election didn't go on a certain date. It was early 2025 when he had to officially call an election by really early 2025. And if you've been paying attention, you'll know that the current governing Tories have gone through multiple different leaders in the span of the last election to this election, which has led to many people keep demanding that the UK go into an election, but each leader has basically said, no, we're not going to do that. And now Rishi Sunak has finally agreed to basically do an election. Now the question is, now there are a lot of things that are going on. Like, one of the biggest questions that a lot of people have been figuring out is like, wait, why? Why does he want an early election? Because usually what happens is when you call an election early, you're usually trying to build political momentum, or you're trying to make sure that your governing coalition can withstand any potential happenings going on. But if you've been looking at the polls, you'll know that Labour has been very much beating the Tories, and a lot of there's some polls that literally even go so far as to say that there would be a almost 500 to 15 landslide in this election. So the biggest thing that many people are trying to figure out is that there's a good chance that Sunak just wants out. However, Tories are a little mad, so they're actually trying to make it so that he would in fact have to leave. They're trying to make it so that he leaves office so that they can call off the election. But I don't think that's going to happen. It's a little too late for that now, I think. I think people are finally ready for actually a new election. Now, you've seen that Labour is doing well, apparently, in the election, and, well, very sad that that Labour Party isn't going to be good at all, because this Labour Party is basically fucking New Labour on steroids, because there are many Tory MPs that have flipped to join Labour in this upcoming election and have been endorsing many Labour candidates in the election. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been listening to some news stories that I've said previously, a lot of prominent Labour candidates have been kicked out of the party and have been forced out for different candidates, which has led to a lot of interesting things. But the biggest thing that happened with that was basically the situation regarding Jeremy Corbyn. If you remember, Jeremy Corbyn used to be the leader of the Labour Party, but then he was kicked out of the Labour Party. Not only due to the electoral loss in 2019, Corbyn resigned as Labour Party leader, hoping that Labour could get them back on track in the upcoming election. But after Keir Starmer got elected, he's basically given the middle finger to anybody who is in Jeremy Corbyn's wing for literally any reason, for alleged anti-Semitism, which isn't true, to accusations of basically for any reason he's kicked them out. Even ones that have stabbed Jeremy Corbyn in the back, like Diane Abbott. Some of them have been pushed into the arms of George Galloway's Workers' Party, such as Chris Williamson. But one thing that is very interesting is what has happened with Corbyn, because Corbyn has made an official announcement, because he was kicked out, he became an independent candidate. He became an independent, and everyone's like, wait, so what are you going to do now? And Jeremy Corbyn's made the official announcement because Islington North, his constituency, he had the chance to go in and he had the chance to still be selected as the Labour Party candidate. But then Labour announced they were picking a different candidate. So Corbyn made the decision. He's going to stand as an independent candidate in the upcoming election. And this is a big fucking deal. Literally, this is a big deal because this means it's done. There is no going back, because this is how it works in mostly in a lot of parliamentary systems. Parties, at least for governing officials, it's way bigger of a deal than it is for America. In America, literally, if you wanted to, you can just cross the party line any day, every day. And in Mexico, that happens a lot too. But in the UK, they have very stringent rules for a lot of people in regards to parties. And one of those rules is a Labour put rule, where you cannot run as a Labour Party candidate if you run against the Labour Party. That's one of the reasons why George Galloway wasn't allowed back into Labour when Corbyn was the leader, even though many people were actually saying that he should bring Galloway back. Corbyn saying it's a moot point because Galloway stood against a Labour candidate in the last special election, so he cannot be a member of the Labour Party for 5 more years. So yes, it means it is official. Corbyn and Labour have officially separated. maybe if Corbyn, like, wins, he'll be able to reform and make a new party, respect Party 2.0, but better? But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that. I was going to ask in this video if you wanted me to do the UK election. That was going to be coming up on July 4th, which is the funny thing, because, like, Independence Day, haha, funny. But I already put a poll up, and then, as of right now, the poll does have people say they won't mind, like, 2 election videos being done in July. So, I guess that's what's going to happen, probably, if the polls stay up. And now let's move on to 2 very bad news stories, because these are stories that show America's failing 100%. First comes from Nikki Haley, who has made the stunning announcement that she will vote for Donald Trump. Wait, is this supposed to be surprising? Like, the media really seems to be like, oh my goodness, she's endorsing Donald Trump. It's like, yeah, no. She signed the fucking pledge. She signed the pledge that said she would. Why are we surprised? We're surprised that the GOP is a cult. And that despite the fact that they're literally like, Donald Trump is a failure for democracy. He's ruining America. He's doing all this and blah, 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 all this stuff. Oh yeah, by the way, we're still going to do it. It's like, wow, what a shock. Oh my goodness. Who would have thought? There's a difference between being critical of a politician and then voting for them anyways, and this, because, like, literally, during the debates and all this stuff, like, all these Republican candidates were literally, like Chris Christie and Nikki Haley, like, these people were literally like, Donald Trump is, like, a threat to democracy, that he's, like, they literally went that far, and then by that notion, it's like, okay, yep, we're gonna vote for him anyways. It's like, wow, I guess you don't fucking care, which, surprising none, no, but it doesn't surprise anybody that the GOP doesn't fucking care. Of course they don't care. They care about nothing. The only thing they care about is keeping their child sexual predator as their fucking presidential nominee. Like, literally, like, that thing, like, in 2016 where Donald Trump said, like, he could shoot someone on 5th Avenue and nobody would bat an eye. Like, that's true. Literally, that is abundantly true. Anything could happen to Trump. And literally, none of the GOP, like, candidates or politicians that are elected right now will say they will not vote for Donald Trump. That is a fact, a literal fact. The most you're gonna get is, like, somebody who was a has-been, like, 15 years ago. It's like, oh, I'm taking a big stand against Donald Trump. Like, if the fucking GOP, if any of the, like, because even there's, like, a list, it's like, oh, GOP people who oppose Donald Trump. It's like, most of this is just people who endorsed other candidates in the primary. Like, no, we need a general election, like, analysis. We need people who are, like, general election people who oppose Donald Trump. And we're not going to see that anytime soon. Literally, we're not going to see that anytime soon. Like, literally, even the point, like, I mean, the only one is Adam Kinzinger, who has endorsed Joe Biden. It's like, but yeah, he's a has-been. He's not politically relevant anymore. And even fucking, like, people who are, like, the super diehard anti-Trumpers, like Mitt Romney, it's like, oh yeah, what's he going to do? Because he got interviewed, and they're like, who would you vote for, Biden or Trump? He's like, well, it's like, if he actually believed that Donald Trump is a genuine threat to democracy, like, if you genuinely believe that Donald Trump is, like, a threat to democracy, a fascist, all these bad things, there is literally no other electoral scenario except for voting for Joe Biden. Like, literally, all these people are doing are just hoping and praying that Trump either dies or is arrested for his crimes. Neither scenario seems to be happening. Like, they're gonna wash their hands clean of the affair because it's like, well, we did all we could do. It's like, no, you didn't, you fucking idiots. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing. It's gonna be even more depressing because Samuel Alito, Supreme Court Justice, is showing that he is, that, like, we're just seeing, like, how fucking stupid all this is. Like, I'm starting to see why people, like, abolished the Supreme Court or, like, all this stuff. Like, I'm starting to see why. I'm starting to see why some people are like this now. Because, like, surprise, surprise, Samuel Alito has far-right leanings. Wow, what a shock. But he basically got caught because he, like, had an upside-down flag at his house. And then, like, well, that's a little bit suspicious. Why does he have an upside-down flag? And then it turns out that's supposed to be a January 6th symbol. And it's in the lead-up to a Supreme Court case that's going to be dealing with January 6th insurrectionists. And then his beach house had another January 6th affiliated flag at his house. basically, if you don't know U.S. flag culture, upside down flag is supposed to be like a scenario like, oh, bad things are happening, but January 6th people, like far-right fascists, like idiots, like appropriate that to be like, see, the country's failing because our candidate lost. And then the other flag is called the Appeal to Heaven flag, which was a Revolutionary War symbol, and since all these people, like literally fucking cum themselves over, like, Revolutionary War era, like stuff, like, they just, like, literally just fucking love, like, they love that. They love just jerking off to that kind of stuff. Except they only like doing it to, like, fake pretend versions of how the scenario was. Not, like, actual real scenarios. Like how they're the same people who would support policies like anti-gay policies, anti-vaccine policies, anti-secular policies, and also would vote for things like increasing the voter age, despite the fact that literally, quite in the most literal sense, the Founding Fathers were literally, like, young. Like, when I say young, I mean literally, like, look at the ages of the Founding Fathers at the time of the Revolutionary War. They weren't that old. Who were very, very, very critical of religion, who instituted vaccine mandates at the fucking, literally, they had immunization mandates in the fucking Revolutionary War times, and the fucking biggest kicker, especially considering the month that's coming up, I was going to save it for that time, but I guess I'll just say it now, like, one of the fucking Revolutionary War generals, Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben, the general that is quite literally credited with turning the Continental Army, the army that is the reason why we have the no step on snake flag, like, he took that army, well, army is a loose term, he took that group of farmers and laborers who knew nothing about fighting and turned them into an actual viable fighting force, was openly fucking gay. But these same people are like, no, the gay groomers. Like, yeah, like, this is the fucking dumbest thing about all these, like, fucking reactionary people. They don't know anything about history, then they claim they have this, like, deep connection with this spiritual nature of, like, the fucking past, and it's just, like, nonsense. But, like, yeah, like, the same people who support, like, that love, like, the Revolutionary era, but not the actual relevant parts that actually happened, but, like, the fake parts that they made up in their head. Like, that's why they have those movements like that. Like, of course, fucking Alito is, like, in that same crowd. I mean, one of his best buddies, Clarence Thomas, literally his wife was in charge of trying to overthrow the Democratic election of Joe Biden in 2020. And people are trying to ask him, like, are trying to be, like, politely be like, hey, can you two guys, like, recuse yourself from the case, please? Please? That's not gonna fucking happen. Of course it's not gonna fucking happen, because we live in a fucking crazy world where this just doesn't make sense. This is so fucking infuriating. And if you notice I'm louder and, like, all this stuff, is because no one's home in this house at the moment, so I could literally just be as loud and crazy as I want. But, like, the very, like, because we can't, like, again, like, this can't be fair, because this is why the Supreme I just can't talk about this. Like, this, it's not even what the story says. Like, the story's about a censure case that isn't going to happen, because of course it's not going to fucking happen. Dems are too limp-dick to do anything. Apparently they're going to try and tell on Alito to Roberts, as if that's going to fucking do anything. Like, because I have no faith that anything's going to happen. Ignoring the very obvious biases that would happen under fucking Alito and Thomas, and how they should legally be allowed to recuse themselves. Like, they should legally be recused to the cases, and even though the fact that literally every single left-wing justice on the Supreme Court, they recuse themselves from cases that they think that they're too politically, like, motivated against. But no, like, they have to do it, but not when the conservative fascists do it, not when they do it. The fact that Clarence Thomas is on the court at all should be just disqualifying. The fact that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are still in Congress is disqualifying. Our system is fucking broken. We have politicians that literally were, like, doxing members of the House and be like, hey, people who are invading the House right now, Nancy Pelosi's not in this place, so don't look in this place. Nancy Pelosi's over here. The fact that she's not in fucking jail right now, the fact that people like this are still in office, still making decisions, still doing all this stuff, and not in fucking jail. That's what's fucking infuriating. This just makes no sense. In no other nation does this happen. Post-Nazi Germany didn't just randomly decide to elect a bunch of Nazis back into the chamber. They waited like 30 fucking years. They waited like years before they did that. Like, it's so infuriating. But I guess I'll move from like infuriating topic that will probably raise my blood pressure like a lot and move on to a topic that is actually good. The main topic of this episode. An election that I've been building up to talk about for a while now. Not in the format that it will be later. It's probably going to be the only foreign election. Well, I guess technically the next Mexican foreign election, when I have to do that one, this will be the first one that'll make it the process from this to this, from podcast to main series at one point. Because if you know, I had a Mr. Beat ripoff series of Mexican presidential elections that I've been doing for a while, and this next one will be a good one because it'll be the first one with the new computer, new editing style, new all that kind of jazz. But before we get to that, we're gonna have to do this video, which is basically to serve as a coverage of the election up to this point as it's still fresh, and not when we have all the information together. So this video and that video will be different to a degree, like I guess with the things that I cover and talk about. And it's in the format of this sub-series, which is good. Anyways, I guess we'll just have to get into it. First, we're going to have to get into why this election is important. To which I have to say, I have an entire sub-series to explain why this election is important. Which is why we're going to go through this a little bit briefly. Like, usually I try to get more in depth, but like, for Mexico, I think I do have the ability to be a bit more brief in the analysis, because I've covered all of this already. I've covered videos on this stuff already. I've covered the parties already. Like, I've done through a lot. I've listed Mexican presidents post-revolution. Like, I've done it all. But we will go through it again. But again, briefly. We're only going to cover some of the biggest things that happened for a long period of time. Some will be more brief than others, but we'll get a general understanding of Mexican politics for a while. First, let's start off in 1876. Yes, we're going back that far because this is one of those ones where a long time ago in the past, things get relevant to now. First, we had a man by the name of Porfirio Diaz who became president of Mexico. Rather than being good, he decides to become an effective dictator for 32 years, literally basically being Mexico's 100% sole figurehead for a long period of time. Then, 1910 rolls around. People are like, man, we're getting kind of sick and tired of this guy in charge. And then he heads to America, because Mexico and America had really close relations at the time. So he says, hey, I know some people call me like a dictator, but I think Mexico's finally ready for democracy. Then, a man by the name of Francisco Madero, who was a rich Mexican, got the newspaper from America and said, oh, he's ready for democracy. I'll run for president myself. But then, the reason why he said it in America and not in Mexico was because he didn't want Mexicans to know that he wanted them to be a democracy. Because he didn't want them to be a democracy. He just said it to America so that America would get off their back. So then he was like, sorry, bro. And then he arrested Madero for trying to run against him. And then rigged the election anyways. Madero escapes, then decides to declare a revolution, which lasts from late 1910 to around mid-1917. Two prominent figures in the revolution are Generals Pancho Villa in the north and Emiliano Zapata in the south. While Pancho Villa was basically around the same ideological leanings as like Madero and stuff, basically a liberal, Zapata was an indigenous socialist who continued to fight against the liberals who took charge after they managed to get Diaz out. Because the liberals weren't necessarily ready to actually do anything to fix any of the problems that Zapata had with Mexico. The fighting in the revolution did not officially cease until Zapata was killed, and another general named Alvaro Obregón was elected president by some, promising to implement some of the policies that the Zapatistas followers liked, particularly land reform. That was one of the big things they really wanted, reforming land redistribution. He didn't do a lot of it, but he did enough of it to get the Zapatistas, at least as what they are called, like the Liberation Army of the South, he did enough to get them off his back. Then came a man by the name of Plutarco Elias Calles, who was elected president in 1924 after assassinating Pancho Villa, who starts to get a little bit of corrupty here and there. And Obregon's like, ooh, cool, this is going to be interesting. So those two kind of get a little bit corrupt and start like leaning a little bit to the right with certain things, such as Calles being very harsh and persecuting Catholics in the nation, while Obregon decided to run for re-election, despite the fact that the new presidency, like the new law, was that you couldn't run for re-election. And then when two people rose up against him, he's like, I'll kill you too, and then he killed them, and then he became president. And then he got killed. Oops. So then Calles is like, oh boy, I'm afraid of a potential civil war in Mexico. So in 1929, he decides to form a new political party that we all know today as the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or the PRI. And to make sure that there's no problems, he basically abolishes every single party that exists and says, you are all now members of the PRI. To some nitpicking commenters, like, he didn't technically abolish the parties, but he effectively did so by making the PRI the party that everybody would go for. But he also decided that he didn't feel comfortable with people doing things outside of his vision of Mexico, so he decides to rule Mexico behind the scenes, managing to get 3 puppet presidents into office. 1 through election, 2 through appointment. And basically, the rules were he got to decide who was the PRI's candidate. So basically, it was just dictatorship, but with an election as well. But then he made one small mistake because the PRI kind of decided, we kind of like this other general in the army named Lázaro Cárdenas. Can he be the presidential candidate? And then he's like, sure, why not? What's the worst that could happen? Then 1934 rolls around. Lázaro Cárdenas gets elected president. And unlike Calles, who was a former socialist turned borderline fascist, Cárdenas was just a socialist. So he's like, I don't really like you, Calles. You're doing a lot of fashy things. I don't like you that. So then Calles was like, I don't like you either. But then Cárdenas is like, yeah, but here's the problem. I'm president, you're not. Lol, loser. And they kicked him out of the country. And then Cárdenas came in and it's like, okay, so I have a party that basically controls the entirety of Mexico. And everyone's just going to agree with what I say because I'm the president. Normally, people in this situation try to do bad things and become evil, but Cárdenas decided, you know what? I actually want to try doing some good things. So he did some land redistribution alongside nationalizing the petroleum industry in Mexico via a state-run petroleum industry known as Pemex. However, then came some people who didn't like Cárdenas at all. They didn't like the fact that he was socialist. They didn't like the fact that he was a secularist. They didn't like the fact that he was a anti-fascist. But don't worry, they were just a conservative Catholic party. They were not fascist. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Oh, and by the way, there were also fascists in the nation that were outside of that party who also hated Lázaro Cárdenas and literally tried to do some crazy fascist things. So then he was like, again, due to the fact that he was more conciliatory and more open-minded than Calles, he actually decided to do something interesting and try to actually appeal to these people and appointed a man by the name of Manuel Avila Camacho to be the candidate for the next election, who was a center-right-ish Catholic, or at the very least centrist. And when he left, then Camacho was like, I'm going to appoint some guy to my right. And then the next guy, Miguel Valdez, was like, I'm going to appoint a candidate to my right. And then they just keep doing this over and over and over again until the PRI officially consolidates power and shifted very heavily to the right. To the point where by 1976, there was literally no alternative to the PRI, quite literally. Literally, the only opposition candidate is a man by the name of Valentin Campa, who is a communist who had to run as a write-in candidate. And even the PRI realizes, this is a bit suspicious, having only one candidate on the ballot. maybe we should actually try to do something to change that. So they implemented a little bit of proportional representation, which led to third parties in Mexico to kind of blow up. Then 1982 happened, and then Mexico basically blew up because Miguel de Madrid was an absolutely terrible president. Why? Because he's the first explicitly neoliberal president. And he did like a really shitty thing because he kind of just really showed how neoliberal he really was, because during the Mexican earthquake, he literally told people, like he told like ambulances and rescue workers, rescue the machines to keep our factories ready and don't save the dying factory workers. Shock of all shocks, people were like, this guy fucking sucks. And one of the people who said, man, this guy fucking sucks, was a man by the name of Cuauhtemoc Cárdenas, who is the son of Lazaro, who was like, man, my dad's party has basically just completely like fucked itself. Maybe I should try something a little different. And he basically forms a new political party called the PRD. Nearly wins on his first try, but then Miguel de Madrid literally decides to rig the election so that he doesn't win. Which made a lot of leftists in Mexico go like, fuck. Electoralism can't even work because they literally just rigged the election so we can't win. So in 1994, many of them just said, fuck it, we're gonna go live in the forest, get guns, and take over Chiapas. And that's what led to the Zapatistas to rise up, which puts Mexico in a little bit of disarray. And then there's a guy by the name of Luis Donaldo Colosio who decides to run for the presidency as a member of the PRI. And he actually decides, you know what? I'm actually going to run as a very good reformer. I'm going to try to fix Mexico. You know what? These Zapatista guys, they kind of have a point. Mexico's kind of been fucking over the indigenous population and the poor for a long period of time. And I think we should actually do our best to fix things and make things better. Coincidentally, Luis Donaldo Colosio gets assassinated, which has absolutely no connections with the fact that he criticized the incumbent president at the time, who got so mad that they actually wanted to replace him as the nominee, but couldn't because the filing deadline has passed. But since he was dead, they could replace him with a candidate named Ernesto Zedillo, who was way more conciliatory to the neoliberal establishment. But again, no relation whatsoever. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. However, Zedillo sucks as well, so what ends up happening is that in the 2000 election, a shining knight named Vicente Fox got elected. Big news because the PRI lost their power. That totally not at all fascist-related party at all managed to get elected. And it's like, okay, dude, now what? Now what? Your party's been clamoring for years that you're going to do all this good stuff. Now what? And he says that for 6 years until the next candidate of that party wins, Felipe Calderon, who decides to be massively different from the PRI and their evil corruption by being corrupt, but also being corrupt, but also killing people. Wait, the PRI did that. Shit. How about we do it on a massive scale and call it a drug war? Then in 2012, because people didn't like that, they were like, maybe we should give the PRI another chance. And then Enrique Peña Nieto got elected, who basically just continued what Calderon did, but also privatized Pemex massively. The thing that even the PAN couldn't do. Dude even managed to get the left-wing PRD to be on board with the idea of privatizing it. Then 2018 rolls around, and Mexico decides to go, you know what? 78 years of uninterrupted neoliberal capitalism hasn't really been working so well for Mexico, has it? Wait, hold on. Who was that guy who was elected right before the neoliberalism streak? Wow. A socialist? Maybe we should try electing one of those again. And that's when a two-time presidential candidate named Andrés Manuel López Obrador has managed to become president. And, well, a lot of people have been saying a lot of things about AMLO, especially with the election that's going on right now. a lot of people seeing this election as kind of being a referendum on AMLO. Which is ironic, considering there already was a referendum on AMLO. We will get into some of the bigger issues in a bit when we go to the issues part, but let's talk about some parts of his tenure that don't really, connect that much to the, issues that are plaguing this election, but are issues that are notable enough to discuss. First, corruption. Now you might say, huh? How's that not? It's a little bit related, but not necessarily. One of the big things AMLO, like most politicians, run on is a massive anti-corruption platform. And AMLO was very, very much big on this idea, to the point where he literally said that if he were elected, he would try every single past president of Mexico because of all the corruption that happened under their administrations. With corruption being seen as a very stereotypical part of Mexican politics. It's considered a very stereotypical part of politics in general, but corruption is kind of seen as very, very, very ingrained in a lot of things about Mexico. To the point where my father even went so far as to say that the Mexican equivalent of the DMV is essentially corrupt. The corruption goes to that level where he was he tells the story of he told the story about how he was really excited to drive because he'd been practicing driving and all this stuff, and he was really, really excited. And then when he got to the place, the person told him oh no. We don't have to do any of that. Just give me money, and then I'll just give you a license. And AMLO hasn't really necessarily he's done some things in regards to corruption, but I guess technically not enough. The truth of the matter is that there really won't be, most politicians won't do enough to battle corruption. Very unfortunately, I wish there's a lot more that could be done. I'm pretty sure there is a lot more that could be done, but unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily the case. AMLO didn't even get to arrest all the past presidents. Most of them are still around. I think the only thing notable that happened to the past presidents after, during AMLO's tenure is that one of them fucking died. And I don't think AMLO had anything to do with that. There was also a little bit of a criticism due to the fact that some people argue, okay, but, the corruption that AMLO targets is, very coincidentally, a party line thing. Which is very typical, again, of a lot of, policies in regards to corruption stuff. Nayib Bukele would very much run on the idea of the leftists are corrupt, and AMLO would probably run on the rightists are corrupt. Another thing that AMLO did was that he created the Health Institute for the Well-Being in an attempt to get Mexico universal healthcare, which partially worked. From what I've seen, it seems to be single payer on paper, because the idea was that this thing would basically cover everyone in Mexico who is not covered under a currently existing healthcare program, like their Social Security Institute. But the implementation has kind of been very criticized as well, with some people even going so far as to point out the fact that, I think it'll be one state will have one place of this thing. So it's it's universal technically, but it's how universal truly is it? It's one of the biggest differences about access to healthcare versus healthcare, whether or not you believe healthcare is a human right, or do you believe that access to healthcare is a human right. There's a fundamental difference between those wordings, and it eventually ended up dissolving and is now just part of the Social Security Institute, which is, I don't know, hopefully that gets things on a better track, but I don't know if it does. And he tried to literally make healthcare constitutional rights, but that didn't end up happening either. He nationalized lithium. It's not the thing he wanted to nationalize, but he did it. COVID in Mexico was very mixed. It seems that by virtue of it being a smaller nation and more competent state governors, things were handled slightly better. I don't necessarily remember, I think some people said that he said some slightly sussy stuff, but overall he did try to incentivize some people to stay at home. I remember there was this policy where it's he put education on the television so that people would be incentivized to keep their kids home instead of taking them to school. AMLO managed to get a lot of big infrastructure projects like Tren Maya and the Felipe Angeles International Airport, which, there's some criticisms that you could make about individual aspects of those policies, but their infrastructure that did end up getting built, that is an accomplishment. Some rulings of the Mexico Supreme Court that AMLO didn't necessarily have an explicit role in, but to a degree, he had a role in. He didn't make it so that all these places, like the Supreme Court has to do this thing, but like the things that happened under his administration that were pretty cool. The decriminalization of abortion, legalizing marijuana, legalizing same-sex marriage, pretty good things. They even went so far as to understand that when they legalized same-sex marriage, that the states that had same-sex marriage still illegal, they still had to legalize it in those states and make it like official codified laws in the states, and didn't just rely on a Supreme Court ruling. If only we learned that and didn't have to figure that out like years later. But here are the big issues that are plaguing this election. It seems that this election is boiling down to basically 3 or 4 big issues, at least from what I've seen. First, big issue that is kind of hard to ignore, Pemex. If you remember my rant about all those things prior, Enrique Peña Nieto began a bit of a privatization program of Pemex, the nationalized petroleum industry that Mexico has. And AMLO, one of his big things was that he wanted to push against any more privatization and in fact push to renationalize some aspects of Pemex. And he's making a big point that the opposition, they will probably try to privatize more Pemex. They'll probably try to make it so that it's more open to American interests. Pemex is basically the Mexican left's baby. That's their pet issue that they just fucking love. They will love every single aspect of Pemex. Like how a lot of social democratic nations in Europe will rely heavily on their single payer systems as their crowning achievements for politics. The United Kingdom, one of their big things the Labour Party is we love the NHS. We love the NHS. And one of their top things that they'll say is oh yeah, but the opposition, the Tories, they want to privatize it. Or to an extent, Democrats in America who run very heavily on Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, and run on Republicans trying to privatize it. Speaking of that, welfare, AMLO created some new social welfare programs in Mexico that are very popular. I don't know about the one that I said previously, but this one is apparently really popular. The Pension for the Well-Being of Older People, where people over the age of 65 get a pension, and AMLO's, of course, making it a point hey, I brought you this. Me and my party, we brought you this. Opposition, they didn't want to bring you this. I wonder what they'll do if they get into power, huh? But those two are noticeable, but not necessarily the forefront issues. These two seem to be the biggest forefront issues for the election. First is, quite aptly, electoral reform. AMLO, in the final part of his term, has been attempting to reform Mexico's election system through various measures. Initially, he was very bold with one thing he wanted to do, actively pushing for the abolition of the National Election Institute in Mexico, calling it bloated, and wanting to form a completely new electoral body that would be done in a lot of different ways. He wanted it to be you would elect the members of the INE, or I guess elect the members of this new election board. But that was so immensely unpopular that people protested against it, so then AMLO has kind of mellowed out his positions. Now, he wants to do these things. He wants to reduce funding to the INE to allegedly stop corruption, because the INE is known for a little bit of its, like a lot of institutes in a lot of places in not only Mexico, but in a lot of government agencies around the world, known for a little bit of corruption here and there. Given the fact that they literally rigged the election against AMLO in 2006, which is a little bit of a sussy thing, and they wouldn't implement any electoral reforms to fix the situation that led to the 2006 election. It makes sense. Makes sense that he's a little salty on that regard, but, for good reasons. He wants to make city councils smaller. He wants to remove the proportional representation seats at all, just remove them entirely. He wants to make citizen referendums only need 30% to make them binding as opposed to 40%, because one of the big things that he's been trying to do is try to make it so that referendums are more commonplace in Mexico. But through the current system, they aren't really that useful of a tool outside of just a popularity contest. And, finally, making federal judges an elected position. Now, some of these positions are not that bad, honestly. I would say, federal judges being elected isn't that bad of a concept. That's pretty good, honestly, all things considered. Fixing corruption in the INE would be good. I'm not necessarily a fan of the proportional representation plan, but, I mean, that's just what he wants to do. It's a rare AMLO L. But the biggest thing that has been the big issue of this election seems to be security. AMLO has tried to change the way Mexico has been doing criminal justice since the Mexican drug war, pushing for a policy known as abrazos no balazos, hugs, not bullets. Basically, a peace-based security plan that would prioritize tackling the root system, like the root cause of crime, poverty, and drug prohibition, which has led to many accusations that AMLO, and by extension, his policies, like his party and coalition, being either soft on crime, or a more common one is that an accusation of why is AMLO not as punitive to the cartels as previous administrations? Implying that AMLO is, either implying or just flat out stating that AMLO is a partner to the drug cartels, with many people saying that he's a narco-prez. We'll get to it in a bit. Not an anarcho-prez, but a narco-prez. Now, let's talk about this. Let's ignore all that part. Did his plan work? Well, it's a little complicated. While the raw number of homicides in Mexico are somewhat high, the percentage of crime is actually much lower than previous administrations, which leads to, of course, very obviously biased reporting on both sides of the aisle. AMLO will go, see, crime is down by blank %. Then opposition figures will go, crime is up by this many people. One particular crime that many people have been pointing out and have been critical of AMLO on is the fact that there's been a rise in femicides, i.e. murdering females, with many people using that to point and make accusations that AMLO is misogynist, who will let women die on his watch, but, that's a little bit of a shady thing, because, his whole, policy is supposed to be less punitive criminal justice system, trying to tackle the root system, and there's been a lot of things that you could say about, why didn't AMLO get this done, or why didn't AMLO get this done, and he's not a monolith. He doesn't have the 100%, rule in the Congress. He doesn't, it's why some people try to compare, Cardenas to, AMLO, and it's, because AMLO tries to compare himself to Cardenas a lot, but, the difference between it is that Cardenas literally snap fingers, he can do anything. AMLO has an actual functioning democracy underneath his slate, so he has parties that go against him. We'll say, hey, we don't like this bill, so we'll vote against it. So again, you have to go case by case to understand the ins and outs of this. And now we're at the part where I can finally talk about the candidates, parties, coalitions in this race. Now, I've covered this race in news stories for a while now, so I kind of don't have to go as in depth again, but I have to go in depth at least on the candidates and the coalitions, because I already made a video again talking about the 7 major political parties in Mexico. So I don't have to go in depth about the individual parties, because there are also these things called coalitions. Wow, what a surprise. Now, the first thing that makes this election a bit of a disappointment is the fact that it isn't a 4-person race. Now, what I mean is that in Mexican presidential elections, what usually ends up happening, at least in the very recent years, is that usually what happens is you got the 3 main people, and then you get a couple of voices, a couple of additional voices that show up. I'd say this kind of started around 2000 is 2000 started the precursor, because you had Fox, La Bastida, Cardenas, and then you had 3 other candidates who ran. Then in 2006, you had Calderon, Madrazo, and AMLO, and then you had 2 other candidates who ran, Patricia Mercado and the other guy, the guy who ran with the New Alliance Party, and they kind of were also there. Then 2012 was kind of when we kind of got the full analysis of this idea. You had Enrique Peña Nieto, AMLO, you had the PAN's candidate, and then you had Quadri enter the scene, who was sort of this mysterious 4th force in Mexico, who was a little bit different from everybody, who was very noticeably going to be very last place, but they were notable enough that some people could find him somewhat interesting. In 2018, we had that as well. We had the three main parties, and then we had El Bronco. Margarita Zavala was also kind of there, but then she dropped out like at the last second, so it's like irrelevant. And unfortunately, I was really hoping for that fourth person to show up, but unfortunately, that ain't the case. It's just going to be a 3-person race. Kind of defeats the whole purpose of having 7 parties if only 3 people run. And now let's finally go over them. We'll start off with the governing party / coalition's candidates, because they're the ones who are the biggest ones to lose. We have Claudia Sheinbaum, former head of government of Mexico City. The reason why that title is a little bit weird is because the governor, it's essentially a governor and a mayor together. Technically, Mexico City is a city, but is also considered the federal district. So, and since they live in a country that actually treats their federal district with respect, they actually treat them with respect. So they're considered on the same level as a governor. She represents the Sigamos Haciendo Historia coalition, or the Let's Keep Making History coalition, which is a play on the 2 previous coalition names that AMLO did as well. Together we will make history, and together we make history. It's sort of like when Trump's campaign slogan was let's make America great again, and then his attempted slogan for his second term was going to be keep America great, but it wasn't as catchy as make America great again, so nobody cared. The coalition is considered a broadly left-wing coalition due to the fact that it consists of 3 political parties: left-wing populist party named Morena, a socialist political party named PT, and a green conservative, allegedly center-left PVEM. I still don't believe the PVEM, being center-left. That news article was a flat-out lie. It is a lie. They're whatever fucking ideology they say they are of that year. I should mention that Sheinbaum is actually, a member of Morena. No duh. She ran in the, I guess it's technically a primary, but it was more polling. She ran in that area and was basically kind of the de facto obvious candidate. I refrain from calling her the Didazo candidate, because I wouldn't necessarily say it's that much. If AMLO had officially endorsed her, then maybe. But the fact of the matter is, AMLO kind of was okay with 3 people. If you don't remember the race, there were 6 people who ran for the coalition's presidential nomination. There were 2 people who represented the other coalition partners, PVEM and PT, who nobody gave a shit about. And then there were 4 Morena candidates, Ricardo Monreal, who nobody gave a shit about, Aiden Augusto Lopez, who nobody gave a shit about except for AMLO, Marcelo Ebrard, who was AMLO's best buddy for a long period of time, and Claudia Sheinbaum. Basically, each of them ran under different ideas. The PVEM guy ran on, oh, I am the PVEM guy. The PT guys ran on, I am the PT guy. Ricardo Monreal ran on, I am Ricardo Monreal. Aiden Augusto Lopez basically ran on, you remember that, I don't know if you know this, but, in the 2018 presidential election of Brazil, there was that thing where it's Haddad, Lula, Haddad, Lula, Haddad, Lula. Basically, he ran on, Lopez, 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 That was basically the thing. He was of AMLO's home state. He was a member of AMLO's cabinet. He literally just ran on I am AMLO. I am AMLO 2.0. That's what he ran under. People give some of the candidates shit for being too close to AMLO, but Aiden Augusto Lopez, he literally was just I am AMLO 2.0. Sheinbaum also ran as a pretty close to the AMLO administration, but did kind of hint at some slight differences between her and AMLO. And Marcelo Ebrard basically ran on, hey guys, look, I know I came from this center right-ish party from the 2000s, and I basically joined in with AMLO's coalition just to basically ride his coattails. But it's my turn to be the nominee. It's my turn. It was in fact not his turn, because everyone else just wanted Sheinbaum. Everybody else wanted Sheinbaum. AMLO even made it a point. This is the closest thing that makes her a possible Didazo nominee, but because it's AMLO said hey, if push comes to shove, I'll endorse her over you, buddy. Sorry. But anyways, what is she actually running on? Well, Sheinbaum is running under the idea of continuing AMLO's reforms, dubbed the Fourth Transformation, but with a lot more detail. She actually has a 100-page platform, but it's in Spanish, so I can't read it. So I can only rely on the data and translations that I've gotten from other people. So basically, one of the things she wants to do is pass the INE reform that AMLO wanted to do. Rare L. She wants to put a one-term limit on every single elected office in Mexico, because it's actually not a thing in Mexico. Basically, Mexico used to have this idea where basically the rules were you were only allowed one term. Like, the Mexican president has a one-term limit, governors have a one-term limit, and the Congress used to also have a one-term limit. But now they limit you to, I think, 2 terms. So technically, the Mexican Congress was the only Congress in the world at the time that actually would change its nominees, like change the entire slate every single, like, cycle. Though, there were still, like, wiggle rooms that you could use to try and, like, stay in office a little longer. Like, maybe in one election cycle, you run as the candidate of your specific district. Then the next cycle, you run as the proportional race district. So technically, those are 2 different offices. She wants to spend $13.6 billion in renewable energy projects. She wants to maintain Pemex's level of privatization to public, like, stuff, if not fully renationalizing it. She wants to create a welfare program for elderly people ages 60 to 64. She wants to officially legalize abortion. And she makes some hints that she is to AMLO's left on issues like feminism. That's who the government is running. Who are the people who are running against the government? Because, as stated before, with a lot of Mexican politics, your politics essentially boils down to, are you for or against the person in charge? So, who are the people who don't like the people in charge? First, we have Xochitl Galvez, a former senator best known for wearing a dinosaur costume to criticize AMLO's energy plans. You're calling him a dinosaur. I literally didn't learn about this until I was writing, like, this part of the video. I was like, huh? Oh. Okay. Definitely will be perfectly good for using that to point out. Like, that'll be good for that for when I make the video. That'll be great. She is running under the Fuerza y Corazón por Mexico coalition, or the Strength and Heart of Mexico coalition, an allegedly big tent coalition of the center-right PRI, the right-wing PAN, and the center-left PRD. Basically, the thing that unites them all is they all hate AMLO, and they want him gone. And one of the big things is that a lot of people made the joke, like, especially AMLO, and a lot of the SHH and especially Morena people, have led to criticizing them. Like, they don't call the party, like, the coalition by any of its actual names, because it's gone through many names. Va por Mexico, Frente Amplio por Mexico, Fuerza y Corazón, but they never refer to them by any of those names. They refer to them as the PRIAN, and that name is a little bit funny when you realize something. It's a portmanteau, especially very early on. It was a portmanteau of the PRI and the PAN. Notice that the PRD doesn't get mentioned. That's because everyone agrees that the PRD is basically irrelevant in Mexico nowadays. I even go so far as to make a bold prediction that I think the PRD is going to close its doors in this election. I don't think the PRD is actually going to be able to maintain a force in Mexico. I think literally after this cycle, they're going to lose their registration because nobody's going to vote for them. And after the cycle, it'll be it. They'll try to get back on the ballots in the midterms, and then when they either don't, or when they massively lose because nobody cares about them anymore, they're just going to fade away. Now, Xochitl's platform and her as a person is actually very interesting, because she is kind of like the furthest that a PRI or PAN person can be for a candidate. Because she actually doesn't seem like that. Like, on a first glance, she might not seem that bad. Because she has a very strange, like, amorphous ideology. You know, because there's a lot of criticisms that you can make about a lot of Mexican political parties. Because, like, some of them just kind of like one of the terms is chameleon. Like, one of the most famous Mexican politicians, Porfirio Muñoz Ledo, is well known for being a chameleon politician. And Xochitl's kind of like that, where she has a lot of affiliations. She's been primarily affiliated with the PAN, but she was in this weird faction of the PAN, where somehow she managed to get left-wing parties like the PT and Convergence for Democracy, which is a new party nowadays, the PRD. She even went to the point where she was literally going to be a member of the PRD, She literally was going to resign to the PAN and become a member of the PRD. And yeah, if you look at her platform, she actually makes a very interesting point to try to be different from what people would perceive the pre and the PAN to be. One of the biggest things is she makes a very big point, like, I am not going to cut welfare. I'm not going to cut any of these social programs. Even going to the point where she decided to take a blood oath to prove that she will not do this. Expanded healthcare. She wants to expand healthcare spending. She wants to make a national childcare program. She wants, instead of trying to make a new social welfare program, she wants to lower the eligibility for the elder pension to 60. She wants to maintain the INE as it is. She wants to push for a modernized energy system, which is an implication of being like green energy. But then comes the last two parts of her platform that, make people realize, wait a second, she's just using different language. She doesn't want to privatize Pemex. She just wants to open up Pemex to foreign investors, particularly America. And biggest one that she can't really avoid is that she's running on a very tough on crime policy, more prisons and military attacking gangs, basically copying the Nayib Bukele approach in Mexico, because that sort of harsh on crime mentality is now spreading far and wide in Latin America. And last and least comes Jorge Maynez, former member of the Chamber of Deputies, who is 23 years younger than the other two candidates. If you don't know, that is my age. One notable thing I'll say about him is the fact that he's actually sort of home state representation, because he's from Zacatecas, which is where my bloodline comes from. Yeah. Now, I didn't really talk about the Fuerza y Corazon primary process, but I guess I can't really avoid talking about this process without mentioning this. Like, first, I guess I'll mention the party, the Citizens Movement. That's his party. He's running under the Citizens Movement, a center-left, social-democratic, social-liberal party, which is pitching themselves as a third way between AMLO and the PRIAN. Now, if you remember a lot of things, you'll know that he actually wasn't the first person that they wanted to get to be the nominee. The Citizens Movement was actually going through a long process to choose a nominee, to the point where a lot of people were literally trying to figure out what the heck are they doing. Which is why the Frente Amplio and the Fuerza, I keep referring to them as the Frente Amplio. That's why the opposition keeps changing its name, because they couldn't have the old party join that coalition. So they would reform coalitions to give the MC a chance to join the coalition. Because there was one faction, the MC, which was really, really, really open to the idea of joining with the coalition. Enrique Alfaro Ramirez, who is the governor of Jalisco at the moment, being the leader of that faction. But there was another faction that was like, hey, I don't want to do that. We want to maintain the MC's independent status as a party. The two leaders of this faction were the leader of the party, Dante Delgado, and governor of Nuevo León, Samuel Garcia, who was one of two people that they were actively trying to groom for the nomination. The other one being Luis Donaldo Colosio Riojas, who was the son of the Luis Donaldo Colosio that got shot in the head. And despite the fact that Colosio said no, I wonder why he didn't want to run for president. So Samuel Garcia decided that he was going to run. And he was literally at the point where he was going to request his 6-month leave to run for president. Because in Mexico, what you do when you're a government official who wants to run for another office is you're supposed to request a 6-month leave to do the campaign. However, the Nuevo León State Congress was ruled by the PRIAN, so they wouldn't appoint his party to be the new governor. So, ultimately, the choice was either have Jalisco be still an MC hotspot, or run for president. Garcia chose to keep MC as the governorship of Nuevo León. Did I say Jalisco? I meant to say Nuevo León. Now, Mañez was the guy who was in charge of Garcia's platform, of his presidential ambitions. So then it's just like, okay, I guess you're the president now. You're the presidential nominee now. Okay, so what does he actually stand for? Well, according to his platform, he wants to put 4.5 of Mexico's GDP into infrastructure by 2030. He wants to transform the Commission of Electricity and Pemex into green energy companies. He pushes, and one of his biggest things is the idea of a national pacification plan, where he wants to end drug prohibition, institute more police academies, ending some pretrial detention, and strengthening public defenders. Basically a way to try and be a middle ground between the pre-Ann's harsh on crime policies and AMLO's soft on crime policies. And to prove how serious they were, the MC has decided to bring back Uawi, who was the person who sang a very famous song during the 2018 election, Movimiento Naranja, to make a new version for this election cycle, which now has 12 million views. And they also created a second music video called Presidente Mañez. Alright, so now that we got the candidates, what the heck happened during the election? Well, very early on, AMLO attacked Xochitl Galvez due to alleged business irregularities that she had done, including divulging some personal tax info that he had on her companies, which was technically a taboo, as incumbent presidents are not allowed to attack or promote any candidates running for office, which by attacking Galvez, AMLO was violating. But it's unenforced, so nothing happened except for the fact that they just said, hey AMLO, don't do that again, and he didn't do it again. He's attacked the pre-Ann and like the establishment and the opposition, but like not really like particular figures. One person that isn't so nice is a man by the name of Vicente Fox, who, unsurprisingly, is backing the pre-Ann's candidate, and has levied some attacks of his own to Claudia Sheinbaum. The first thing came from when the SHH coalition was still choosing their candidate, where he made a tweet in July of 2023 stating, quote, Sheinbaum is a Bulgarian Jew, Marcelo is a French Fifi, Noronha is an alien, and Aiden Augusto is from Transylvania. The only one who's Mexican is Xochitl. Now, the first thing I'll need to mention is the fact that he didn't mention Ricardo Monreal or the PVM guy, but I wonder why. But also the very big fact that he is levied a very anti-Semitic attack against Claudia Sheinbaum, because I forgot to mention, Claudia Sheinbaum is Jewish. She's going to be the first Jewish president of Mexico if she wins, and a lot of people attacked him for that. And he made some vague apology, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, blah blah blah. But then, in September of 2023, he made another tweet calling Sheinbaum, quote, Jewish and a foreigner at the same time. As you mentioned, she's not a foreigner, she's born and raised in Mexico. In September 29th, he made a tweet claiming that Claudia Sheinbaum endorsed him when he ran for president, using a photo of a state meeting that he had with her and AMLO during their overlapping administrations. Not really an attack, but really just like a weird thing to do. And in May of 2024, he decided to call Claudia Sheinbaum a prostitute. Vicente Fox really be doing some crazy things. Another thing that happened is, this is one thing I should mention, it happened like very early on again in the election, like 2023, where the Zapatistas essentially just closed down. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the TLDR is like, they left a lot of their autonomous areas in Chiapas, and one of the reasons why they have been saying that is because of potential cartel violence, but also some people have made a point that it is coincidental that this is happening right around the time of the presidential election. Very interesting. But there's no time to talk about that. We need to talk about the debates, because Mexico had 3 presidential debates, and I didn't get to watch any of them because I don't speak Spanish. So I again had to rely on translations and basically secondhand media coverage of the debates. We'll go bit by bit in regards to each of the debates. First was the one on April 7th. Xochitl went on the offensive, while Sheinbaum was calm and collected. Mañez was also there. Xochitl spent more time in the debates attacking AMLO than Sheinbaum, while Sheinbaum was mostly trying to forge her own path in the debate, which led to AMLO to be pretty mad that she didn't defend him as much as he wanted her to. Put a pin in that for later. And Mañez just sat there and smiled, which led him to trend on Twitter because people were just like, man, these old ladies are fighting each other. Who's this young guy? Then came the second debate on April 28th, which is the most watched debate in Mexican history, with 16.18 million viewers. Galvez was still going hard against Sheinbaum, to the point where the moderator literally had to step in and reprimand Xochitl for doing this. And Sheinbaum made a funny by not referring to Xochitl by her name, only referring to her as the candidate of the Prian and the corrupt one, while Xochitl called Sheinbaum the candidate of lies and the narco candidate. Since the attacks basically ignored Mañez, he remained focused on policies, which, again, made him to be rather popular, with him consistently being like the most searched candidate of the election. It's kind of like with Andrew Yang. When Andrew Yang was on the debate stage, everyone kept looking him up, and then Marianne Williamson looked her up when she was on the debate stage, and like, who the fuck is this person? That's basically what happened with Mañez all the times of the debates. Then came the last debate that happened on May 19th. The debate was originally going to be a face-to-face dialogue debate. Or at the very least, there was going to be a section where the candidates would literally have to be it would be like Xochitl would ask Sheinbaum a question, or Sheinbaum would ask Mañez a question, and blah, blah, blah. Like, they'd all get to ask each other questions. But instead, what happened is that all three candidates agreed to a new format, where instead, they would get to submit questions that they had for other candidates. And they would all give the questions to the moderators. And the moderators got to choose which of those questions to ask, which was criticized by many in the Mexican media, who were like, the direct confrontation seemed to be the best part of this debate. But otherwise, same old, same old. Xochitl attacks Claudia. Claudia says, I don't really give a shit, really. With like some slight critiques back to her, and then Mañez being like, hello, I am also here. But this does lead to a transition to talk about the next part, the next event that happened, because one of the things that happened, that I'm going to talk about with this part, happened during one of the debates. But this ties into a lot of smears, because a lot of smears coming from the Western media who hate AMLO and everything he stands for. Like, that's no secret that the Western media just does not like AMLO. It's been very abundantly clear since day one of AMLO's administration that the Western media just does not like him. And they just made that abundantly clear. They've called him everything underneath the sun. They've called him a right-winger. They've called him a despot. They called him authoritarian. They've called him communist. They've called him literally everything under the book. But one of the biggest accusations that's coming now is the claim that AMLO is a narco-prez, a narcotics president, like that he has some connections to the drug trade, or like full on like he is like completely aligned with the drug trade, like he is like a pawn of drug cartels or whatever. And Sheinbaum will also be one. Coincidentally, it's an accusation that's levied to a lot of other Latin American left-wing leaders. One of the more recent ones happened during one of the debates, where I think it was the third debate, maybe the second one, but I think it was the third debate, where Xochitl Galvez made a stunning claim during the debate where she held up a document and claimed that the leader of Morena, Mario Delgado, was under investigation by the United States for his association with drug cartels. I only heard of this because a commenter commented this, and then I looked it up and found out, oh yeah, wait. Literally this entire thing is just not true. Literally this entire story is just not true at all. And Mario Delgado like literally showed this point blank by pointing out the fact that the document she showed literally stated that the Mario Delgado, that was like, there was a document that she held that said that there was a Mario Delgado that was under investigation for alleged connections to drug cartels. But one part that was interesting is that the document also mentions the fact that in October of 2023, he was on trial in New York for his connections to the drug cartels. And also, this particular Mario Delgado had recently been incarcerated for his association with the drug cartels. Meanwhile, at that same time period, Mario Delgado was, like, Morena's Mario Delgado was free as a bird. Literally, it's just like entirety of October of 2023, he was just tweeting like, yeah, here's me in Guerrero. Here's me in my office. I don't see the jail bars. Like, it's just so blatantly untrue. And he literally pointed out, like, he literally just said, like, hey, Xochitl, show the proof. Proof has magically not shown up that he was jailed or anything of the sort. It's almost as if she just lied. Color me impressed that she just blatantly lied in front of everybody. Wow, that's crazy. Now, I find it very funny that she is attacking Mario Delgado. And the reason why I find it funny is because of a couple of things. But, like, really, it all boils down to one thing. Mario Delgado is, quite literally, the most successful party leader in Mexican history. Literally. In his tenure, not only did Morena get 15 new governorships, but they also made it so that Morena got 2 million more members than it did when Mario Delgado first became leader. And now Morena is the largest party in Mexico. Like, literally, he's just quite literally the most successful party leader in Mexican history. To the point where I'll even just say this. I 100% bet that Mario Delgado is going to be Morena's next candidate. I'm calling it here now, folks. And Porfirio Muñoz wanted to take this away from you by claiming that, oh, if Mario Delgado wins, then Marcelo Ebrad's going to be the nominee. But the biggest one that comes from this sort of accusations came from a ProPublica story that dropped, simply titled, "Did Drug Traffickers Funnel Millions of Dollars to Mexican President López Obrador's First Campaign?" Well, did they? Well, from the story, I don't know. There are a lot of allegeds, a lot of possibles, and a lot of potentials, but not a lot of definitives. I read the story, and it seems like the only connections come from a guy who disappeared and a man by the name of Roberto Lopez Najera, who is an unreliable narrator who has led multiple testimonies that have led to many failed convictions. With the here, let's explain the situation. Basically, back in 2006, there were some people who alleged that there was potentially some connections between at least one of the cartels. I don't know specifically which one. I don't remember explicit. It's a specific faction of like a specific one that had a connection. That some members of some cartels met with some people who were part of the AMLO campaign, allegedly, and they talked and blah, blah, blah. But that investigation was basically immediately dropped because there was no direct link to evidence. And another example comes from the fact that, like, in 2011, when AMLO was starting, like, his second presidential campaign, they talked about the idea of potentially doing a sting on AMLO to prove that he did have connections to cartels by pretending to be cartels and then trying to get him to accept a bribe. But that didn't end up happening. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of like, oh, there might be potential links, but they haven't really proven anything yet. And coincidentally, not only at the time, but in the present, it's very weird that this is what they were focusing on. Because, coincidentally, at the time that they were supposedly investigating AMLO for potential connections with the cartels, they ignored the part where a completely different candidate had explicit connections with the cartels. Felipe Calderon, the guy who they got really close to. With Calderon's Secretary of Public Security, Genaro Garcia Luna, literally being bought by the same cartels that they were claiming that AMLO might have had a connection to. That's why I don't take a lot of this, like, fucking, like, narco press stuff seriously. Because, like, look at the people who are making these accusations. Xochitl Galvez is making these accusations. And she's literally the nominee and was a senator with the party of the person who was literally bought out by the cartels. And coincidentally, when this story dropped, Luna was literally in the news again for his crimes, and he was being sentenced and tried. But coincidentally, don't look at that. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Look at the one where it's like, oh, AMLO might have done it. AMLO might have done it. Interesting. And next thing is a tragic one. At least 30 candidates have been killed while running in the cycle. Sadly, political assassinations of this variety are not exactly uncommon in Mexico. As far as I have seen, it's down because 88 notable political assassinations happened in the 2021 midterms, but it's still noticeable nonetheless. And just to give some levity after that, let's look at 3 gaffes that happened from each of the candidates in this cycle, because each candidate gets 1 gaffe of this in this cycle. Okay, so in February 2024, a video of Jorge Mañez and Sam Garcia drunk off their asses, shitting on the INE, was released, which literally had them being drunkenly be like, INE, investigate us, you won't, you pussies, stuff like that. It's little embarrassing, but not really that important. In April of 2024, Xochitl Galvez stated during a rally that anybody over the age of 60 who didn't own a house was bad at managing money, which led to her getting a lot of criticism, to which she was trying to say, no, you see, I wasn't trying to, say that you all were bad. I'm specifically talking about Scheinbaum, because Scheinbaum rents an apartment. But, I mean, come on. She literally, come on. She literally said, anybody who doesn't own a house by the age of 60 is bad at managing money. It's oh, no, you see, I'm only referring to Scheinbaum. I was no, you weren't. What do you mean? What do you mean? No, you weren't. Even if you was just going after Scheinbaum, literally, she's literally trying to go after her and be she doesn't own a house and she's 60. She's bad at managing money. It's so what did you, that's again, still going after people who are 60 who don't own houses. But one gaffe that has gotten a lot of people's attention was in May of 2024, where Claudia Scheinbaum made a gaffe during a speech at Baja California Sur. She was quoted as saying, "We are not going to reach the presidency like Andrés Manuel López Obrador did, out of personal ambition," later correcting herself to say, "In case there is any confusion, of course I said that we did not arrive because of personal ambition. If there is something that has been understood differently, of course, that is not the case. President López Obrador came to transform our homeland." Basically, from what it seems, she was trying to say, oh, unlike previous presidents, AMLO and me are not driven by personal ambitions. That's basically what she's alleging. She tried to say, but she didn't say that. Now, this gaffe can be interpreted in 2 things. One, it's literally just a genuine gaffe. You understand that in Spanish, a lot of sentences can be completely changed based on wording. Literally. A lot of the languages, a lot of things can be changed literally based on anything. If you're an American who's been in an English class, you've probably seen something hanging in the library or in your English class, a poster of let's eat grandma, and the grandma's what? And then it's oh, put a comma in there, let's eat comma grandma. It's one is saying let's eat grandma, and the other one is saying saying to grandma, let's eat. And Spanish is like that as well. An example that I know from Spanish is that I sometimes listen to the Communist Party song of Mexican Communist Party song, and there's a very common misconception of the wording in one of the most popular lyric videos and in many lyric list things. They read the lyric as follows: "No quiero que mi sangre fluya fácil," which is a very common way to read the lyric, but I always didn't understand that. I was listening to it and it didn't really sound like they were saying what they're saying. I could hear the "Oh quiero que mi sangre fluya fácil," but I couldn't hear the N sound. And then I went into the comments of the video, and one of the top comments literally says, no, it's not that. The lyric is actually "Yo quiero que mi sangre fluya fácil." The lyric is literally just one letter off. And when you hear the lyric, literally, the sentence, the first one is basically a demand of pacifism. But the second one is literally demanding violence. Literally, it completely changes the interpretation of the song just by replacing one letter. It could be that But that's not the interpretation that I personally go off of. I go off of the idea that it's Scheinbaum not so subtly distancing herself from AMLO. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but she's done some things that have like kind of subtly painted her and AMLO as different people. Like, she's done it a couple of times before with debates and all this other stuff. She's trying her best not to run as AMLO 2 Electric Boogaloo, but she also has to make sure that the people who do want AMLO 2 Electric Boogaloo will vote for her, because, I mean, yeah, she wants the people who are super pro-AMLO to be on her side, but she also doesn't necessarily want to be tied down to be like 100% like, oh, I'm just AMLO too. Like, it would be dumb, especially considering the history of Mexican politics. They don't want to just be the Maximado president. They want to be their own person. Another thing that happened is that apparently, I mean, you might remember this if you watched the Mexican like election video, but like, if you remember, there were 43 students that were kidnapped in 2014, and that basically led to the fall of Enrique Peña Nieto's administration and the loss of PRI in the presidency. Well, apparently, the parents of the 43 students that were kidnapped in the Iguala mass kidnapping have called for a boycott of the national elections, going so far as to say, like, none of the candidates are even remotely close to our, like potential. Like, we don't like any of these candidates because they're not really doing anything for this particular pet issue. I don't necessarily know how much of a difference it's going to make, but I felt that was notable enough to mention. And very recently, like, literally as I was doing research ready to record this, I learned about this event that happened on May 22nd during a citizens movement rally in San Pedro Garza Garcia. The stage that they erected at the time to do the event was like collapsed due to the wind in the area. It collapsed and killed 9 people and injured 180 others. Mañez was there and literally almost died. There's video footage of Mañez. Like, literally, if he was staying on that stage, he would have died. But he, like, ran to the back of the stage as fast as he could and collapsed. I'm pretty sure there's some people who are going to get mad at him and be like, oh, why didn't he stay and help? No, like, dude, if you were in that situation, you would have ran too. We all know he would have. But I'm being dead fucking serious. Like, if he stayed there, he would have died. He would have fucking died. And due to this, Mañez has essentially taken a break from campaigning, which is very odd considering the campaign period is almost over. Like, according to this, the campaign period is supposed to end on March 29th, and that's what, in Mexico, like, basically the rule is, like, after the election period is done, like, that's it. Like, after the campaign period is done, like, they shut down everything. They shut down the websites, they shut down everything, just the INE site. They shut down the candidate websites, they shut down, like, no campaigning, period. It's done. Considering the fact that the campaign period is basically almost done, I think it's essentially Mañez closing the door of his campaign early. But some people have been a little critical because they seem to be a little bit suspicious about the fact that Mañez keeps, and like Garcia and a bunch of other people in the MC, keep recording themselves talking to the people who were in that tragic accident. Seems to be that he's using this as sort of a possible campaign tool. I would not be surprised if there's at least one person who claims that Mañez did this intentionally to boost his campaign at the last minute. A campaign that probably did need the boost because Mañez is not doing so well in the polling. Like, I mean, highest he's polled is like low double digits. Not necessarily that surprising. Apparently, he's been polling really good amongst young people, so there's a potential that maybe there could be some upset there, but really, the race seems to be kind of a done deal for Scheinbaum, with her leads ranging from almost 50 points to, like, at lowest 7 points. And yeah, with that out of the way, like, yep, I just gotta be upfront. Conclusion, Scheinbaum is gonna win. I gotta be real. Scheinbaum just seems to be the objective winner. I don't see an upset. I'll even make a weird prediction. I think Mañez has more of a chance to be president than Galvez, but I don't think Mañez will end up second. It's kind of weird to say. I just think for some reason, it just seems very unlikely that they're going to elect another pre-Anne person to be the president anytime soon. Maybe if Sheinbaum doesn't do well, they'll probably elect a pre-Anne next time, and then they'll be like, oh, this time we'll go with the citizens movement after that. But yeah, I genuinely don't think that Sheinbaum has any chance to not be president of Mexico. And hopefully, she is better than AMLO in ways that make her better than AMLO. And while I'm at it, Mexico actually has a couple of governor's races that are going on. Like 9 of them, to be specific. So, I'll just go ahead and just make my predictions for those. Mexico City seems to be a very obvious Morena win. Chiapas, Morena. Guanajuato, PAN. Jalisco, MC. Puebla, Morena. Tabasco, Morena. Veracruz, Morena. Yucatan, PAN. And lastly, there's Morelos, which I could honestly see going either way. But for the sake of this, I'll say Morena. So to recap, best case scenario, Morena gets 22 governorships, PAN gets 5, PRI gets 2, MC gets 2, and PVM gets 1. And since we gotta be real, the PVM governors in the coalition with Morena, so 23 governors essentially. It looks like Morena is gonna be doing fine for this election. Whether that's a good or bad thing, that's up for you to decide, but for me, that's a really good thing. Hopefully, this means good things for Mexico in the future. With that, I'll close the video here. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.